You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Estou passando nesse podcast para dividir uma informação que fez toda a diferença na minha vida. Quer fazer pós-graduação, mas tá impossível correr de um lugar para o outro?
Pois é, ainda mais com o trânsito.
Então você precisa conhecer a educação à distância do Senac. Sabia que é nota máxima no MEC? E tem diversos cursos de pós-graduação para te levar ainda mais longe. 100% online, sem necessidade de TCC e com acesso direto a todos os professores.
Ah, saber isso fez diferença sim.
Inscreva-se já na pós-graduação EAD. Quer saber? Senac EAD.
When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, saving you time and money. With Vanta, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber for $1,000 off Vanta. A WordPress plugin vulnerability puts 5 million sites at risk. Google releases an emergency Chrome update addressing an actively exploited vulnerability. Cisco patches multiple vulnerabilities. Researchers say Slack AI is vulnerable to prompt injection. Widely used RFID smart cards could be easily backdoored. The FAA proposes new cybersecurity rules for airplanes, engines, and propellers. A member of the Russian Karakurt ransomware group faces charges in the U.S. The Five Eyes release a guide on best practices for event logging and threat detection. The Kremlin claims widespread online outages are due to DDoS, but experts think otherwise. In our Threat Vector segment, guest host Michael Sikorski speaks with Jason Healey, senior research scholar at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. And a deadbeat dad dodges debt through death. It's Thursday, August 22nd, 2024. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is your Cyberwire Intel Briefing. Thanks for joining us here today. It is great to have you with us. A vulnerability in the Lightspeed Cache WordPress plugin allows unauthenticated users to escalate their privileges to an administrator level, putting over 5 million sites at risk. The issue stems from a weak security hash in the user simulation feature, which uses insecure random number generation. The flaw allows attackers to brute force the security hash, potentially gaining full control of a site. The vulnerability was discovered by researcher John Blackburn, who received a $14,400 bounty for his findings. Although the vulnerability is mitigated by updating to version 6.4 of the plugin, users are urged to act swiftly. The Lightspeed team has implemented additional security measures, including stronger hash validation and one-time use hashes to prevent exploitation. Google has released an emergency Chrome update to address a high-severity zero-day vulnerability which is being actively exploited in the wild. The vulnerability found in Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine was reported by Microsoft security teams and could allow attackers to execute arbitrary code on unpatched devices. Google has fixed the issue in the latest versions for Windows, macOS, and Linux. The update will be automatically rolled out, but users can manually check and install it via the Chrome menu. Google has withheld further details until most users are protected. Cisco has released patches for multiple vulnerabilities, including a high-severity issue in its Unified Communications Manager products. This vulnerability, with a CVSS score of 8.6, affects the SIP call processing function and can be remotely exploited without authentication. Attackers could send crafted SIP messages to trigger a denial of service condition by causing the device to reload. Cisco has provided patches with no workarounds available. The issue was reported by the U.S. National Security Agency, and there are no reports of it being exploited in the wild. Cisco also addressed 4 medium-severity bugs affecting Identity Services Engine and Unified CM, including SQL injection and cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. Further details are available on Cisco's Security Advisories page. Slack AI, an assistive service within Salesforce's messaging platform, is vulnerable to prompt injection, according to security firm PromptArmor. This flaw allows attackers to exfiltrate sensitive data, such as API keys, from private Slack channels. The vulnerability arises because Slack AI can fetch data from both public and private channels, including those not joined by the user. PromptArmor demonstrated how a malicious prompt in a public channel could trick Slack AI into exposing private data through clickable links. The risk is exacerbated by a recent Slack update that allows files from channels and direct messages to be included in AI-generated responses, potentially making user files a target for injection attacks. PromptArmor has warned that this vulnerability could lead to significant data breaches, urging Slack admins to restrict AI access to documents until the issue is resolved. Slack considers this behavior to be intended, but PromptArmor disagrees. Quarks Lab, a French security company, has uncovered a major backdoor in millions of contactless cards produced by Shanghai Fudan Microelectronics Group, a leading Chinese chip manufacturer. The backdoor, detailed by researcher Philippe Thuen, enables rapid cloning of RFID smart cards, which are widely used for accessing offices and hotel rooms globally. The vulnerability lies in a specific variant of the MyFair Classic card, introduced by Fudan in 2020, which contains a static encrypted nonce countermeasure. Thuen discovered that an attacker with just a few minutes of physical proximity to a card could exploit this backdoor to crack its keys, which are uniform across all cards. This flaw extends to other card models from Fudan and even some older cards from NXP Semiconductors and Infineon Technologies. Quarks Lab urges organizations to assess their infrastructure immediately, as these vulnerable cards are found worldwide, including in hotels across the U.S., Europe, and India. The FAA has proposed new cybersecurity rules for airplanes, engines, and propellers to address the growing threat of cyber attacks as aircraft become increasingly connected to internal and external networks. The proposed regulations aim to standardize and codify the special conditions that have been issued on a case-by-case basis since 2009, reducing the complexity and cost of certification. The rules would require applicants to identify cybersecurity risks, protect against unauthorized electronic interactions, and develop mitigation strategies. These efforts stem from the need to protect aircraft systems from potential cyber threats that could affect airworthiness, such as compromised maintenance laptops, wireless sensors, and satellite communications. While the new rules focus on vulnerabilities with tangible impacts on safety, experts like Joseph Saunders argue that they do not go far enough in addressing future unknown vulnerabilities. The proposal follows a significant increase in reported cyber attacks in the airline industry, which grew by 530% from 2019 to 2020. Denis Zolotaryov, a member of the Russian Karakurt ransomware group, has been charged in the U.S. with money laundering, wire fraud, and extortion. Zolotaryov, a Latvian national living in Moscow, was arrested in Georgia, Eastern Europe, in December 2023 and recently extradited to the U.S. The FBI's investigation revealed his involvement in Karakurt's extortion operations, where the group stole data from companies and demanded ransoms to prevent its public release. Operating under the alias Sforza Cesarini, Zolotaryov's negotiated extortions, including a case where a victim paid over $1.3 million. His arrest marks the first of a Karakurt member being extradited to the U.S., potentially paving the way for further prosecutions. The charges against him carry a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, plus significant fines. Karakurt, linked to the notorious Conti cybercrime syndicate, focuses on data exfiltration without using encryption tools. The Australian Signals Directorate's Cybersecurity Centre, CISA, the FBI, NSA, and international partners have released a guide on best practices for event logging and threat detection to help organizations establish a baseline for event logging. The participating agencies say this guide is crucial for detecting and mitigating cyber threats, especially as malicious actors increasingly use techniques like living off the land and fileless malware. CISA urges IT decision-makers, OT operators, and critical infrastructure organizations to review and implement these recommended practices to enhance cybersecurity. The Kremlin is blaming widespread disruptions on Russian websites and apps, including WhatsApp, Telegram, and Wikipedia, on a supposed DDoS attack targeting telecom operators. However, digital experts are skeptical, noting that it's highly improbable to launch a DDoS attack affecting all 2,000 Russian telecom providers simultaneously. Major telecom operators like Megafon and Rostelecom reported no issues, fueling suspicions that these disruptions were state-imposed. Critics suggest the Russian government may be behind the outages, likely attempting to censor access to Western platforms. This aligns with previous incidents where Russian authorities have intentionally slowed or blocked services, such as YouTube and Telegram, under the guise of regulatory enforcement or anti-terrorism measures. Experts believe the disruptions could be an attempt by Roskomnadzor to block Telegram, inadvertently affecting other services. Such actions are consistent with Russia's ongoing efforts to control digital information within its borders. Coming up in our Threat Vector segment, guest host Michael Sikorski speaks with Jason Healey, senior research scholar at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. It's all connected, and we're not talking conspiracy theories. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. The same should be true for security awareness training. KnowBe4, provider of the world's largest library of security awareness training, provides a way to integrate your existing security stack tools to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and Cisco, 35 vendor integrations and counting. Security Coach analyzes your security stack alerts to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. Use this information to set up real-time coaching campaigns targeting risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. Then coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. Learn more at knowbefore.com/securitycoach. That's knowbefore.com/securitycoach. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. Enterprises today are using hundreds of SaaS apps. Are you reaping their productivity and innovation benefits, or are you lost in the sprawl? Enter Savvy Security. They help you surface every SaaS app, identity, and risk, so you can shine a light on shadow IT and risky identities. Savvy monitors your entire SaaS attack surface to help you efficiently eliminate toxic risk combinations and prevent attacks. So go on, get savvy about SaaS and harness the productivity benefits. Fuel innovation while closing security gaps. Visit savvy.security to learn more. In today's segment from the Threat Vector podcast, guest host Michael Sikorski speaks with Jason Healey, Senior Research Scholar at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs.
Welcome to Threat Vector, the Palo Alto Network's podcast, where we discuss pressing cybersecurity threats and resilience and uncover insights into the latest industry trends. I'm Michael Sikorski, the CTO of Unit 42, and I'm taking over the Threat Vector podcast today as your host. I'm joined here with Jason Healey, a senior researcher scholar at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. Jay, welcome to Threat Vector. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You know, I've been teaching at Columbia University for, I think it's 11 years now. And that's sort of how we first got in touch, although we did overlap together at the NSA, I believe, as well, back in the day. And, you know, I think it's really interesting how the computer science world, which is where I teach, and the School of International Affairs, where you teach, has a lot of overlap, right? And things really start to come together there, especially when we talk about, I see you wearing your Cyber WarCon shirt. Can you give the audience some insight on your perspective as to how cybersecurity has evolved over your time? You know, spending time in the military, the White House. Now you're an academic focused on, you know, the threat at a bigger policy scale. Can you talk about that change over time?
Yeah, thanks, Cisco. First, it's just like you're right. It's incredible how amazing this field that we're in. That we both teach in the same place, but you're on this super technical reverse engineering. I'm dealing with policy students, but we're both trying to say, how can we make things better? Like, how can we defeat the threat actors? How can we leave the world a better place? And the field is so big, right? One of the things that I did was I did the first history book of cyber conflict. Came out 10 years ago. And it was just looking at, if we treat this as military history, right? I came into this through the Air Force. And how does the story look? And some of the quotes that I came across while I was doing that book, I found really astounding. Quotes like, contemporary technology cannot secure a system in an open environment, right? That if you have uncleared people and it's not locked away in its own vault, then you can't secure it. Quotes that say the red team always gets through. And those quotes were from 1970 and 1972. So it's been 50 years that we know that the attackers have these advantages. That if the red team gets through, it's saying to some degree that the adversary, that threat actors are going to get through, that the threat actors have a lot of advantages in their favor. And just having that perspective that, wait a minute, we're not 10 years or 15 years into this. Like, our grandparents were dealing with the same stuff as we are. And unless we do better, our grandkids are going to be inheriting a worse internet and a worse cyberspace than we have today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think there has been some change in recent years. Your talk at Black Hat specifically focuses on some of the groundbreaking nature of the national cybersecurity strategy and the shift that's occurring. I've seen the noticeable shift when it comes to collaborative defense, where I think agencies are more willing to collaborate. When we worked at the NSA, you didn't tell anybody you worked there. Now they have a cyber collaboration center, which is a great thing. We see that going. What do you think, triggered this really big movement the last couple years? Do you think I think of SolarWinds and Colonial Pipeline, those two big events, like somebody seeing disruption to our gas lines, and then also the speed and growth in which China and Russia continue to escalate and specifically the escalations in the wars in those regions. Do you think that's what's pushing it, or do you see it a different way as to why we're finally getting this doctrine that we were always missing and focus of like, this is a real war that's going to be more and more costly over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I never thought of it quite that way, right? Because I suspect there's both supply and demand, right? I mean, there's both been, like you say, the wars that's getting, there's a land war in Europe, and there has been for, kind of like 10 years now, certainly since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, that is focusing attention. And I find that particularly important because I think there's been, when states were at relative peace, right, in the post-Cold War era was the longest period of peace we've had. States in general were not causing cross-border harm, right? So on my side of the campus, right, there's a lot of folks in international relations. And one of the astounding things they've found is that post-Cold War, every kind of cross-border violence has gone down. And so to me, it hasn't been a surprise that we haven't seen nations using offensive cyber capabilities to really cause harm. We've been pulling our punches, and it's largely been an espionage game. So my concern is as you pointed out, now that we're having more geopolitical crises, we're having states that are invading their neighbors for territorial gain, we have to start worrying about a PRC invasion of Taiwan, that states are going to be using these in a more dangerous manner. And so fortunately, I think that's helped drive this. But it's also been, I think, a good supply. And by that, I mean the agencies getting together, the White House. When I was in White House the first time, there were 4 of us that were looking at the internet and cybersecurity. The NSC, even 3 years ago, they had maybe 6 people, 8 people that were looking at defense. Now at the Office of National Cyber Director, you've got 70. That allows them to get in a lot more detail and focus in on things like budgets and skilled workforce and these other areas that we just didn't have the investment, we just didn't have the resources to invest in.
All right, Jay, thanks a lot today for joining us on the Threat Vector podcast. I think it was an awesome conversation covering education, cyber war, and everything in between. Look forward to collaborating with you more into the future.
Great. Thanks to the entire Palo Alto team. It's nice that we can zoom out like this sometime and have these larger conversations. So appreciate everything that Palo Alto is doing.
That's it for Threat Vector today. Stay safe, stay secure. Happy reversing. Goodbye for now.
Be sure to check out the Threat Vector podcast right here on the N2K CyberWire Podcast Network or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business. And finally, our Deadbeat Dad desk tells us of a 39-year-old U.S. man, Jesse Kipf, who was sentenced to 81 months in jail for a bizarre and ultimately failed attempt at faking his own death. Kipf, who apparently didn't want to pay child support, hacked into Hawaii's death registry system, posed as a physician, and officially killed himself off. His ploy worked, at least for a while, as government databases marked him as deceased. Meanwhile, Kipf enjoyed his new dead status, thinking he was off the hook for child support. But Kip's antics didn't stop there. He hacked into other states' death registries, corporate networks, and even tried selling access on the dark web. The law caught up with him, though, and he's now facing over $195,000 in restitution, plus a lengthy stay in the slammer. Turns out, faking your own death isn't as easy as Googling how to stop paying child support when you're dead. And that's the Cyberwire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karp. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Strata is your solution for securing on-prem and cloud apps without the hassle of refactoring. Modernize legacy systems with MFA or passwordless authentication and ensure continuous identity availability across multi-cloud environments. Say goodbye to tech debt and hello to seamless integration. Strata helps you reduce stress and gain control over your identity architecture, enhancing security and efficiency. Join industry leaders like 3M, Navy Federal, and Kroger who trust Strata for their identity needs. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge and receive a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Transform your identity management today at strata.io/cyberwire. And our thanks to Strata for being a longtime friend and supporter of this podcast.